My parents cut me off for refusing to fund my brother's startup. Now he's bankrupt. They're broke, and I'm the only one they can't control. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the practical one while my younger brother, Liam, has been the family visionary. Least. That's the word my parents love to use. Visionary, dreamer, gifted. Meanwhile, I was the one who worked part-time jobs at 16, studied late at night, and saved every spare penny because someone had to stay grounded. Sometimes I think I grew up with this quiet understanding that I wasn't allowed to fail. Because all the room for mistakes had already been handed to Liam, I still remember sitting at the kitchen table during high school, highlighting a chemistry chapter while Liam sprawled across the couch announcing he was going to build the next Facebook. My dad laughed like he'd just heard prophecy. "See? That's what ambition looks like," he said, glancing at me like I wouldn't understand. I swallowed the sting and kept studying, because what else was I supposed to do? As I got older, responsibility became my entire identity. I worked 2 campus jobs in college, so I wouldn't drown in debt. I skipped vacations, skipped nights out, skipped anything that cost money or time just to stay ahead. Liam, on the other hand, bounced through projects, an online clothing brand, a crypto group, a podcast each, one dying within months. But every time he quit, my parents brushed it off, calling him creative and telling me I needed to loosen up. "Don't be so rigid," my mom would say whenever I questioned another one of Liam's grand ideas. Some people are meant for more. I always wondered what that made me. Last month, Liam announced he was launching a life-changing tech startup. He stood in the living room, eyes shining, describing it like he'd cracked the code of the universe. My parents listened like disciples. By the next morning, they were bragging to relatives about their son heading toward billionaire territory. But as I watched them celebrate, a familiar anxiety clawed at my gut, because every one of Liam's dreams had always come at someone else's expense, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he reached for mine again. I found out about the investment opportunity 2 days later, when Liam cornered me in the dining room with this smug, rehearsed smile. "Hey man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were business partners instead of brothers. "I wanted to talk to you about something big, something that could change our lives." His tone made my stomach drop before he even continued. "I only need a small investment, 25 grand. Just to get things off the ground." I actually laughed at first because I thought he was joking. "Liam, that's my entire house fund," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But he didn't budge. "Yeah, but think of it as temporary. You'll get it back tenfold once the app blows up." The fact that he said once, not if, told me everything about how delusional he'd become. When my parents joined in, the ambush became painfully obvious. My mom crossed her arms like a disappointed teacher. "Your brother believes in something big, sweetie. You should be proud to help him." My dad added, "Family supports each other. You've been saving for years, you can spare it." I stood there in disbelief, feeling like the air had thickened around me. "I can't give you $25,000, I said slowly. "I've worked too hard for that." The shift in their expressions was instant. My mom's forehead tightened. "So you're just going to let him struggle?" And Liam Gotti actually sighed dramatically. "I knew you'd be like this. You've always hated that I dream bigger than you." That one hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true, because it was the narrative my family had built around me for years, that I was small, safe, boring. By the end of the night, they weren't treating it like a request anymore. They were acting like I owed them this, and for the first time, I realized their definition of family support only ever pointed in one direction. The ultimatum didn't come loudly. It came quietly. In that suffocating way my parents used when they wanted something, but didn't want to look like villains asking for it. 2 nights after the investment talk, my dad knocked on my bedroom door with this overly calm voice that immediately put me on edge. "We need a word," he said, and I followed them to the living room where Liam was conspicuously absent. Like he knew the pressure would work better without him there. My mom folded her hands neatly in her lap. "We're giving you a week," she said, her voice almost soft. "Transfer the money to Liam before his launch window closes." I stared at them, thinking I'd misheard. A week for what? To do the right thing, my dad answered, as if that explained everything. I felt my chest tighten. Dad, I've said no. I've saved for 8 years. I'm not throwing away my stability for a gamble. My mom's tone shifted instantly. You're being dramatic. It's not a gamble, it's an opportunity for your family to grow. Liam just needs a little help. And when hasn't he? I shot back before I could stop myself. The disappointment in their eyes wasn't subtle, it was a full-blown accusation. So you're choosing money over your own brother? My dad asked. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing responsibility. Someone in this house has to. That's when my mom stood up abruptly. Enough. If you can't support your family, then maybe you don't need us. Maybe you should figure life out on your own, since you think you're so independent. There was nothing quiet anymore. The threat hung in the room like a blade. I remember sitting there, numb, as my dad added. We're cutting you off until you apologize and decide to help Liam. A week. That's all. They walked away, leaving me alone with the echo of a decision they'd already made. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever truly been their son nor just their safety net. The fallout started faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from relatives who barely acknowledged me on normal days. My aunt sent the first one. How could you do this to your parents? Liam needs you. Then my cousin chimed in. Money comes and goes, but family is forever. It was obvious my parents had already rewritten the story, painting me as the cold, selfish son abandoning his family in their moment of need. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. The narrative had already been decided. When I called my mom to ask why she was telling people I refused to help my struggling brother, she didn't hesitate. Well, isn't that exactly what you did? She snapped. People deserve to know why the family is hurting. Mom, I didn't hurt anyone, I said. I just said no to giving away everything I've saved. Her voice sharpened. You've always been so obsessed with your money. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need. The part that hit hardest came later that evening. Liam posted a vague but painfully obvious message on social media. It's sad when the people who claim to support you are the first to abandon you. But some of us weren't meant to stay small. The comments were full of sympathy. Cheering him on, calling him brave, calling his doubters toxic. Felt my stomach twist when I saw my parents liking every single reply. I walked into the kitchen that night to find a trash bag sitting by the door filled with my childhood photos, old trophies, and school certificates. My dad didn't look up from his plate when he said, "We need space. It's best you take your things." It wasn't space. It was punishment dressed as boundaries, standing there, holding pieces of my own childhood in a garbage bag. I realized something cold and final. They weren't angry because I said no. They were angry because they believed I didn't have the right to say no. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. A week passed in a blur of silence, tension, and that constant Legrad ache you get when the people who raised you suddenly treat you like a stranger. I tried to distract myself with work, with errands, with anything that didn't involve thinking about the fact that my own parents had tossed my childhood into a trash bag. But then, one morning, I woke up to an email that snapped me fully awake. The subject line read, "Additional documents needed for loan approval." My stomach dropped. I hadn't applied for any loan. I called the bank immediately, pacing my apartment as the representative pulled up the file. "This is regarding your $40,000 business loan request," she said casually. "We just need verification of your income." I stopped walking. "I didn't apply for a loan." There was a pause. Papers shuffled. "The application has your name, date of birth, partial social security number, and employment details. It was submitted 2 days ago." I felt my blood go cold. 2 days ago. The same day, Liam announced he needed unexpected expansion funds. When I asked for more details, the rep lowered her voice. "Honestly, we see this sometimes in family situations. Someone close enough to know details tries to open credit under another member's identity." Her tone said more than her words. Asterisk, I drove straight to my parents' house without thinking. My mom opened the door like she'd been waiting for a fight. "What now?" She sighed. "Who applied for a loan in my name?" I demanded. My dad stepped in, hands raised. Calm down. Don't start accusing us of you knew about the amount, I said. The bank didn't tell me that. My mom's face tensed, but she didn't look surprised. And then Liam appeared at the top of the stairs, smirking like he owned the place. Relax, he said. You would have gotten your money back eventually. That sentence, so casual, so entitled, hit me harder than anything he'd ever said. I felt something inside me snap, something that had been stretched too thin for too long, and for the first time in my life. I wasn't just angry, I was ready to fight back. I walked out of that house shaking, not from fear, but from this unfamiliar, burning mix of betrayal and clarity. For years, I'd convinced myself my parents were just misguided, overly protective of Liam, maybe a little blind. But standing there, realizing they'd let him use my identity like it was a family resource, something in me broke. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said I'm done, and closed their front door behind me, more quietly than they deserved. 2 hours later, the group chat with my extended family lit up again. This time the tone was uglier. My uncle wrote, "Your parents are crushed. You're acting heartless," my aunt added. "Your brother is under immense stress. You should be helping, not making things worse." I stared at the messages, stunned by how quickly the blame had shifted entirely onto me, as if having my identity stolen was a mild inconvenience compared to Liam's dreams falling behind schedule. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept replaying Liam's smirk, my mother's look of irritation rather than guilt, my dad pretending confusion he absolutely didn't feel. That night, I turned off my phone and sat in my dark apartment, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant traffic outside my window. For the first time, the silence felt safe, final, like a heavy door had closed. Meanwhile, Liam kept moving forward. Within a week, he launched his startup, held a flashy live stream, standing in front of LED lights he couldn't afford, talking about innovation, disruption, and a revolution no one asked for. People in the comments hyped him up. My parents stood proudly behind him, nodding like he was presenting a Nobel Prize. What they didn't mention publicly was the part that stunned me most. They had liquidated part of their retirement savings to fund him after I refused. I watched the replay with my jaw clenched, realizing that if this thing crashed, and it would, the fallout would be catastrophic. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It started with a tiny crack, a review from some tech blogger who clearly hadn't been paid off. I remember reading it while eating leftover pasta at my kitchen counter. Barely functional. Crashes every few minutes. Feels like a rushed school project. I could almost hear Liam's outrage through the screen. For a moment, I actually felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I reminded myself, he tried to steal my identity. Sympathy wasn't my responsibility anymore. The next crack was louder. "I got a text from my cousin Mark, one of Liam's early investors, bro. Did you know the user numbers he showed us were fake?" My heart sank. "He faked data?" I typed back. Mark replied almost instantly. "Yeah, someone leaked the back-end metrics. Launch day numbers were inflated like crazy. Investors are pissed." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the message, wondering how far Liam had gone this time and how far my parents had let him. A few days later, another blow hit him. His developer, the guy Liam bragged about hiring for cheap, posted a rant online calling Liam unprofessional, dishonest, and completely delusional about timelines and skills. Screenshots of messages were included, and they painted a brutal picture. Missed payments, constantly changing requirements, and Liam threatening to replace him with someone who actually believed in the vision. My parents, of course, insisted everything was fine. "It's just jealousy," my mom said, during a voicemail I didn't ask for. "All startups struggle at first," my dad added. Their voices sounded rehearsed, like they'd memorized motivational quotes to avoid facing reality. But reality wasn't done with them. Inside industry circles, Liam's name was becoming a joke. Members from small business groups posted warnings about him. Reviewers mocked the app on Twitter. Someone even made a meme calling him the visionary of bugs. And slowly, painfully, Even the most loyal relatives began whispering that things didn't look good. But I knew something they didn't. This wasn't the collapse. It was only the first tremor. The real collapse came like a tidal wave, slow at first, then violently all at once. I heard about it on a Wednesday morning right as I was leaving for work. My dad called, something he hadn't done in weeks. His voice was brittle, thinner than I'd ever heard it. We need to talk, he said. I could hear my mom crying in the background. Even before he explained, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. They'd lost everything. Liam's loans had come due. The silent investors he'd courted were demanding explanations. The bank wanted the collateral, my parents' house, because apparently Liam had convinced them to use it as leverage after he depleted their retirement savings. We thought it was temporary. My mom sobbed when I finally went over. He said the app would take off. She looked so small, so broken, hunched over on the couch that used to be her pride. I wanted to feel something anger, pity, anything, but I mostly felt hollow. Where's Liam? I asked. My dad's jaw tightened. He left, took his things, said he needed space. He hasn't answered our calls in 3 days. Of course he did. Liam always disappeared when things fell apart. He'd never stayed to face consequences in his life. The house was eerily quiet. All the framed photos had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles behind. Boxes were half-packed. The place smelled like cardboard and the faint must of panic. My mom clung to my arm. We don't know what to do, she whispered. We could lose everything by the end of the month. Her voice cracked on everything, and for a moment, something inside me cracked with it. Extended family reacted exactly as expected. They blamed me. If you'd helped from the start, if you'd just trusted your brother, you pushed him too hard. It was almost laughable how quickly the guilt shifted back onto me. That night, sat alone in my apartment, lights off, staring at my hands. For the first time, I felt truly, painfully alone. I wasn't just the responsible one anymore. I was the abandoned one, the blamed one, the one everyone turned to only when they needed saving, and for the first time, I didn't know if I had anything left to give. It happened 3 days after the house officially went into foreclosure. I was eating dinner alone, leftover curry, still warm in the takeout container, when someone started knocking on my apartment door. Not tapping, knocking, hard, urgent, desperate. For a second, my stomach twisted because I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, my parents stood there, looking like shadows of themselves. My mom's eyes were swollen, my dad's shoulders slumped like the weight of years had suddenly settled on him. Can we come in? My dad asked, voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside wordlessly. They walked in slowly, like people entering a church after a funeral. My mom sat at the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. We didn't know where else to go, she said, her voice trembling. Your brother won't answer us. We haven't heard from him in almost a week. I stayed standing. What do you want from me? My dad swallowed hard. We need help. The bank froze our accounts. We don't have a place to stay. We were hoping you could. Maybe co-sign a loan. Or let us stay with you. Just until we get back on our feet. The entitlement was subtle, but it was still there, that quiet expectation that I'd clean up the mess, because I always had. My mom reached out toward me. You're our responsible boy, she whispered, as if saying it sweetly would erase everything that had happened. You've always been stable. We know you can fix this. The words hit me like a punch, not because they were kind, but because they weren't. They were strategic. Then Liam walked in behind them. I didn't even hear him in the hallway. He strode in like he owned the place, wearing a hoodie and that same infuriating, dismissive expression. So, he said, looking around my apartment with a disgusted smirk, you're going to help them, right? I mean, it's the least you can do after everything. After everything, my own brother said that. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Something that wasn't anger this time, but clarity. No, I said quietly. All 3 of them froze, and for the first time in my life, I watched them feel powerless. The silence that followed my no was so sharp, it felt like another person standing in the room with us. My mom blinked like she didn't understand the word. My dad's jaw clenched, and Liam. He let out a short laugh, the kind people make when they think you're bluffing. "Come on," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Don't be dramatic. They're your parents. Just do the right thing for once." For once, I felt something burn in my throat, but my voice stayed steady. "You want to talk about doing the right thing? Okay, let's talk." My mom straightened, instantly defensive. "We've always done everything for you." "No," I cut in. "You've done everything for Liam, and you've expected me to fill in the gaps every time he burned through another plan. I said no to giving him my savings, and you threw me out of my own family. Then you let him use my identity for a loan." My dad's face reddened. "We didn't know you knew," I said softly. "You slipped up when I confronted you. You knew, and you let him do it anyway." My mom pressed a hand to her forehead. "We were under pressure." "You don't understand. I understand perfectly," I said. "You always expected me to clean up Liam's disasters. That's not pressure. That's a pattern." Liam scoffed. "Whatever. You're just being petty. We wouldn't even be in this situation if you hadn't abandoned us when we needed you." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "I didn't abandon anyone. I finally stopped letting you steal from me." "There's a difference." My parents exchanged frantic looks, sensing the shift, the power they'd always held, slipping through their fingers. My dad tried again, softer this time. "Son, don't do this. You're all we have left." Shook my head. "That's not true. You still have each other. What you don't have anymore is control." I walked to the door and opened it. "You need to go," I said quietly. My mom stood slowly, tears sliding down her face. My dad hesitated. Liam muttered something under his breath. But even he didn't push closer. They stepped into the hallway, stunned, small, unsure, and as I closed the door on them, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the disappointing son. The morning after I closed the door on them, I woke up expecting guilt to hit me like a truck. That's how it always used to work. They'd push, I'd break, and then I'd spend days drowning in self-blame. But this time, the guilt didn't come. Instead, I felt this strange, unfamiliar lightness. Like I'd stepped out of a room where the air had been slowly poisoning me for years. Still, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. Too like I was grieving a family that maybe never really existed, I threw myself into work. My manager commented that I seemed more focused than usual. And I almost laughed because the truth was darker. I needed something to anchor me. I picked up extra shifts, went to therapy for the first time in my life, and forced myself back into a routine. Therapy hit me the hardest. When I told the therapist everything, my brother's entitlement, my parents' favoritism, the identity theft, she didn't even look surprised. She just said, "You've been parentified your whole life." Hearing it out loud made my chest tighten. Meanwhile, news about Liam's life trickled in through relatives who suddenly remembered my number. My cousin texted first. "He's back living with your parents. They're renting a tiny apartment in the old district." Another message followed. "Your dad's working nights at the warehouse? Your mom picked up a cashier job. You were struggling," and yet no one dared say the truth aloud. They'd chosen this path. They'd gambled everything on Liam again. They'd burned their bridge to me with their own hands. When relatives called to gossip, I answered with one-word responses. Some apologized, quiet, hesitant apologies that felt more like self-protection than genuine remorse. We didn't know the whole story. If we understood earlier, we would have backed you. Maybe they meant it. Maybe they didn't. It didn't matter. Late one night, sitting on my apartment balcony with the city humming below me, I realized something profound. I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. For once, my life was moving forward while theirs was stuck exactly where their choices had led them. And for the first time, I understood what peace actually felt like. I closed on my first home in early spring. A small, clean two-bedroom on a quiet street with morning light that spilled through the windows like something out of a life I never thought I'd get to live. The realtor handed me the keys, and for a long moment, I just stood in the empty living room, breathing in the soft echo of my footsteps. This was what 8 years of sacrifice, discipline, and lonely, quiet responsibility had been building toward. Not approval, not praise, not being the family's safety net. Freedom news spread fast. I didn't tell anyone, but someone always tells someone, and eventually the information trickled back to my parents. I got the text a week later, first from my mom, then my dad. We heard about the house. Maybe we can meet. Rebuild the family. That phrasing rebuild hit me like deja vu. Every time they'd apologized in the past, the apology wasn't for hurting me. It was because they needed something. Still, part of me wanted closure, so I agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our places. Neutral territory. No emotional ambushes. They arrived looking fragile, worn down by life in ways I'd never seen before. For a moment, I felt that old the instinct to help, to fix, but I stayed still. My dad cleared his throat. "We've made mistakes," he said, eyes downcast. "But we're still a family." My mom reached for my hand. "Liam's trying to get back on his feet. Maybe you could help him try again? Just a little?" There it was. The real reason. I pulled my hand back gently. "No," I said. "I'm done funding Liam's dreams, and I'm done being your backup plan." My mom blinked fast. "So, that's it?" I nodded. "That's it. I'm moving forward. You can too. But not through me." We sat in silence until they finally stood, unsure, defeated, walking out of the cafe like people who had just realized the one person they took for granted had finally grown beyond their reach. When I stepped outside, the air felt clearer, the sky wider. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the responsible son. I was simply a man who chose himself, and that was a future they could no longer control.